I always think that content has to be the glue between everybody because we're the ones that we're the ones who make the thing that gets used by everybody.
Hey, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of Content Briefly. Today, we're talking to Zoe Hawkins. She's the content principal at a company called Sumo Logic, a fairly technical product that she'll do a much better job explaining than I will. We covered a bunch of really interesting things. A couple themes that came up in this episode were curiosity and how Zoe creates space for herself and her team to be curious and go down rabbit holes, which so often leads to better writing and better content. We talked also about editorial debt, essentially all the stuff on the site that needs to be updated, refreshed, fixed, improved like visually. She has a really interesting process for that. A lot of teams have this problem. I've never actually heard it called editorial debt, but I really like that. And I really liked her perspective on it. And she also tipped me off to a few tools that I had never heard of. And she described exactly how she uses them. So lots to like in this episode. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I think you will too. This episode is brought to you by our friends at Teal. We talk a lot on it about marketing, and when it comes to your career, the product you're marketing is you. But marketing yourself can be hard, even for experienced marketers who could sell honey to a bee. And that's where today's sponsor, Teal, comes in. Teal is your personal career development platform. Whether you're looking to get promoted in 2024 or want to grow your career by making a pivot or landing a new role, Teal's the #1 tool you need, especially if you're tight on time and not sure where to start. With an AI-powered resume builder, a job tracker, cover letter generator, and free Chrome extension that integrates with more than 40 different job boards, Teal's the all-in-one platform you need to run a more streamlined, efficient job search and stand out in this competitive market. You get a purpose-built app to help you track roles and applications, plus built-in guidance every step of the way and some awesome new features coming in the next few months. So if you're thinking of making a change in the new year, leverage Teal and grow your career on your own terms. You can get started for free at tealhq.com. Hey everybody, Jimmy from Superpath here with another episode of Content Briefly. This is the first one we're recording in 2024, but it'll be February by the time people hear it. Anyways, today we're talking with Zoe Hawkins, content principal at Sumo Logic. I'm curious to learn more about the title, the company, but maybe first, Zoe, could you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about who you are and some of the work you've been up to for the past few years.
Cool. I'm Zoe. I have worked in content for over a decade now, which makes me feel very old, but whatever. We'll just keep it over a decade. And I originally was a video game and tech reporter. So I worked in journalism for a bunch of years. Loved it. It was like the dream job, fly all over the world, play video games, write about it. But then when I spawned a person, I got a desk job and I've been working in content strategy ever since, predominantly in the tech industry. So I was at a series of startups and then have since landed at Sumo Logic, where I'm responsible for pretty much all things content. I mean, it's everything from blogs to case studies, white papers, infographics, you name it. I probably have touched it at some point as in this role of content principal. So yeah, it's been a journey, and I think I see more and more journalists kind of getting sucked into content marketing, and it's really cool to see and follow along.
Absolutely. I think the journalism background is just such a perfect foundation for content marketing for many reasons. And maybe the most relevant today, like as we're recording this in early 2024, is this shift that I'm sure many others are observing towards more, kind of human content, like, more subject matter expertise, more stories, more narrative driven stuff, probably a little bit less, at least for some companies, a little bit less focus on kind of the algorithm driven stuff. Do you find that in your own career? And is that affecting the way that you think about Sumo Logic's content this year?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think a big part of what I always think of as one of the most intriguing parts of being a journalist that has translated well into being a content marketer is curiosity. I always joke when I'm in a briefing, learning about a new product or a new launch that we're doing, people will be like, does anyone have any questions? And I'm like, I will always have a question and a follow-up question. Like, that is the journalist in me. I will always have the next question ready to roll. And so I think that's so helpful in crafting a narrative or in crafting, really authentic content. Isn't just like, okay, here's what it is, just take it, that this is it. And, this is the information we have to work with, but really having that curiosity to be like, could we say this? Can we talk about this? Like, what is the next step, or how would the person interact with this? And, being really curious and then open to telling a range of different stories to different people. I think that's really where the journalism background just marries so well into content marketing.
I'm so glad you brought that up. And I'm so glad specifically you brought up the word curiosity. I feel that one of the problems that has kind of evolved over the last few years in content marketing is that many companies run kind of more or less the same playbook. And like, that's fine because there's a couple things that are like evergreen, tried and true, like they work kind of across the board. But in doing that, I think many companies have also over-optimized the process and they kind of remove the creativity and the curiosity from it. So like, just as an example, like I every now and then will get a look at a content brief that's 1,500 words long. It basically is like, just fill in the blanks. You only have to write a couple words to like turn this brief into an article. And there's so much of that. Briefs I have a lot of problems with content briefs, but I feel like they're just particularly representative of the lack or sort of the absent nature of the curiosity in content marketing. So this is kind of like leading into a question for you, which is like, how do you create space for it? Like in most tech companies, like there is a lot of emphasis on efficiency, process, SOPs, things like that. Like, do you have to kind of deliberately build in that space to allow people to be curious?
I think so. And, what you said about the boilerplate or the specificity of briefs and things like that, I think it wouldn't be 2024 if I didn't talk about AI. And I think that's where so many people think that AI can do the work of content marketers. Because if you had a brief where you were like, here's all the points I want you to cover, here's how I want you to do it, here's the layout of the piece, then an AI can play the Mad Libs game and fill it in with some words and call it an article. But I think the way that creativity functions, to your point, like you have to build in space and room for things. And it's often you don't have much time. Like I often talk about it's a one fire drill to the next, where it's like, we're launching this, we need this was due yesterday, this and this, and you have a lot of, you're on the hamster wheel or in the grind. And even just recognizing like, hey, this is something I want to think about. I'm going to take 20 minutes and go for a walk around the block and like chew on this, like while I walk, and leaving that space for creativity, leaving that space for the curiosity. Like I'm going to go think about this and I'm going to have some questions for you when I get back and we'll work through this. Or having, whether it's a meeting structure or an asynchronous thing where you're able to deliver content and say, I don't need an answer on this right now. Like, I want you to think about this. Ask me any questions. Let's go back and forth. And let's aim to have an answer by 3:00, 5:00, to set a deadline still so you still know you're going to deliver the outcomes you need. But really building in that space to say, like, go take this for a walk. Go think about this during lunch. Like, not that you want people thinking about things, their downtime, but like, let this kind of marinate a little bit and see what comes out, I think is really, really key to that creative process and also that curiosity. Because it's only when you start playing with it a little bit and like other connections come in that you're like, oh, actually, does this link back to that? Could we bring this around? And like, is this the story we're trying to tell? And like, bring those questions out that I think is really meaningful.
Absolutely. I feel that podcasting is like a really nice medium for exactly this type of thing. Like, I didn't know you were going to say the word curiosity and then it would spark a discussion on it that we otherwise wouldn't have had,
Yeah.
There was the very first episode of this podcast, we talked to Sean Blanda, who runs content at a company called Crossbeam. And we were talking about how he fills up his editorial calendar. And what he basically said was, I just hire former journalists and they interview lots of people and they report back and tell me all the interesting things they found. And that's what we write about. I was like, oh, that's so simple.
Yeah.
Who knew it was so simple? I want to talk way more about content strategy and operations and all that stuff at Sumo Logic. But maybe first, could you just tell us the who and the what of Sumo Logic? Like a little bit about the company, what is the product, who are the customers, things like that?
Yeah. So Sumo Logic, founded in 2010, tech company primarily around log analytics. So over about 10 years, grew, through the typical startup journey, went IPO in 2020, which, was a journey. And then last year actually was bought by Francisco Partners. So now we are private equity owned. So it's been like this journey in terms of ownership. As far as the product goes, always as Sumo Logic, the logs are key to who we are and what we do. So primarily working with developers and security teams, so like DevSecOps, everything from like security logs, but also like application logs, troubleshooting and monitoring, as well as like handling security incidents. So it's kind of the whole range of what you do with that data as it comes in, and then you're analyzing it. So yeah, that's kind of the core of what Sumo Logic does.
And who do you sell to? Like, are you selling to like CIOs and CTOs?
CTOs, CIOs, also like CISOs, like security side of things. But I mean, it's also practitioners who really buy into our product. Like they find it really easy to use. They love our language and search and all of that. And so, often we'll end up having like a champion who is a SOC analyst or who is a SRE, site reliability engineer, who then needs this tool to do their job and, runs it up the chain to the VP of product or tech or whatever that, kind of oversees it.
It sounds technical. How technical is it? I mean, from a content perspective, like how nitty gritty is the content? How much does it rely on subject matter expertise versus there's like a different version of content marketing for technical businesses where it's more about like making a business case for it as opposed to like appealing directly to a subject matter expert in words that they will, understand and feel comfortable with.
Yeah, it's pretty technical. I'll put it that way. Like I've kind of run the gamut in my career of like, more accessible technology versus like super technical, like graph database stuff where I was just like, I'm going to take your word that this is correct because I don't understand half the words in this. Like I kind of had that range. I would say that Sumo Logic is accessible to a wide range. Like you can wrap your head around what we do if you're not technical, but the use, and like we have plenty of users who aren't super technical, but we definitely appeal primarily to a technical audience because someone who wants to go like find out why the app is broken and read the log data, find the right log for why something broke is going to be technical. But in terms of like, one of the stories I often tell that like just stuck in my head when it's like, what is Sumo Logic and what do we do? One of our customers is Ulta Beauty. And they using Sumo Logic, they found a bug that someone had released in their software that was giving away product for free. And they found it because they got an alert saying like your average cart size has gone down. You might want to go investigate. And they looked and they were like, our average cart size went down to like shipping fees and nothing else. Like, we're giving away free product. And then they were able to find the log of when this happened. They were able to see, it's connected to this latest release. Roll it back and stop giving away free product and avert, millions of dollars in losses. So like, that's not a super technical story, but the actual person who was hands on keyboard going, holy crap, what do we do now? We're giving away free product. Yeah. They were the technical one who had to go figure it out. They're the one who got the slack, like, hey, can you find out what's happening?
That's so interesting. Do you have the problem that many content folks at technical companies do, that it's hard to find writers to write for your audience?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I'm pretty lucky in that like we have a pretty robust team of product marketers. So they own their product areas and work closely with the product managers and the engineers to really understand like the different functionalities and ways things will be used. So they're really helpful in writing like a lot of the launch blogs or like explanations of things or like product focused content. But yeah, like finding someone who can really give like a detailed walkthrough can be super tricky. So I have like one of my star writers is actually, from our security side, and he's able to write like, this is how you do threat hunting. Like, this is how you find out if someone's trying to hack your Microsoft Office instance or whatever. And I was like, so like, that's pretty cool when I read it and like I get exposed to some of this content. But yeah, I'm always having to like reach out to our product managers, our engineers, like, don't you want to write about this? Like, don't you want to share your wisdom with the world?
Yeah. That's so cool. Could you, even if it's in broad strokes, just kind of paint a picture of Sumo Logic's content strategy today, kind of knowing that like these things do tend to change, and like lately meaning the last year, there's been
all the
lots
time.
of change.
Yeah. I mean, we have so we have a consistent editorial calendar, which is not a strategy, but just putting it out there. We have blogs that publish typically once or twice a week. So that's a consistent thing. And then we generally have these like product specific campaigns that run for, over the course of the year, where it would be like anything about, I don't know, Cloud SIM, for example, is one of our security products. And so we would then map out like the full funnel and what we would want to create for like, hey, we think a video would be really useful here. And we think like a clickable walkthrough would be really useful here. And we kind of map out the different stages and then build that out so that it can be used by our demand gen team and our social team and all of that. We sometimes have to work it backwards from events as well. So, it's nothing exists in a vacuum. So often, like, for example, we'll know there's a big, like, Amazon has their big, like, conference at right after Thanksgiving every year, reInvent. We'll want to make sure we have some cool news to share then. So we all work backwards from that to make sure we have, whether it's the blog, a solution brief, case studies, fresh video, whatever that is, that would support that process. So yeah, there's a certain amount of like product focus led content strategy, then like some evergreen stuff that we're always pushing out. And then I also try and devote a certain amount of time to like auditing and going back on a consistent basis, because I feel like otherwise you end up, I always call it like, editorial debt is real. Built into our content strategy is this idea of addressing our editorial debt. So going back, thinking through like, okay, this was a piece from 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 8 years ago. Like, what is this still doing on our website? Is it still relevant? Is it still useful? Is it still interesting to a reader? How can we update or optimize it to make it more compelling, more useful, or even just like more attractive looking? Like sometimes I look at stuff on the website, I'm like, this clearly has been through a few migrations. Like this is not looking fresh. And it just needs a little bit of optimization. So I try and build that into our consistent content strategy as well, that we're not just launching and releasing the latest and greatest news, but also going back and like keeping the older stuff up to date.
Yeah. There's a blog I used to work on that has since migrated, at a site redesign, and every now and then I'll see a post that I wrote like many years ago and just notice that like maybe I created like a visual for it, which now like doesn't fit in the body column, or like the colors don't work anymore. And it's like so painful, but it actually is really hard to make, kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier, to make space to do that kind of stuff. But at a certain size meaning like, total pieces of content on the site, it eventually you hit a tipping point where actually it makes more sense to address editorial debt than it does to create net new, because potentially there's more gains, more value to be unlocked from updating or fixing old things than there is to be from just, continually pumping new into it.
Oh yeah. I mean, I love, like, I consider myself like the queen of content optimization. Like I love it because I'll find pieces that I'm like, okay, this is however old, like it doesn't even matter how outdated it is, but it's like, give it a modern touch. Like, maybe this was the result of like, the hamster wheel, like the industrial fallout of the content machine, just something that looks a little bit, junky over time, or was like originally written to be way too like search term optimized and doesn't read like a person wrote it. There could be a wide range of reasons why it doesn't really work anymore. But when I go back and I, add links and I, bring it back into our modern kind of structures or, architecture of the website, or just make it sound like a person wrote it again, I'll often see like 4x or even 10x jumps in that piece of content. And
wow.
So, it gets me excited because I'm like, we have 1,000 blogs on our page. If we had the capacity to go back and update every single blog, imagine the gains we could have. But of course, trying to resource that and figure that out is a nightmare. But, it's kind of like, okay, we'll do like chunks of 8 or 10 or 20 at a time. And then, let those results kind of speak for themselves and keep going.
Yeah. There's like 2 types of content teams. There's the team that kind of like keeps a little bit of room on a consistent basis to refresh and update stuff. And then there's the team who like every 6 to 12 months is like, oh crap. Like we got to like take a break and go fix up this stuff. And one term that we really don't hear very often in content marketing is inventory management. I kind of wonder if that will become a thing at some point, because at a certain size, like say if you have 500 blog posts or 1,000 blog posts, like you need a way to keep track of that stuff. Like, do you have a process of your own? I don't know if there's any good tools out there for this, but like, how do you keep track of the stuff that is in need of updating?
It is wild. It's the Wild West. I mean, like we have different tools that we do use that I love. So I am going to give a shout out to MarketMuse. They're basically the only inventory management tool that I found that works for what I need it to do. So they are able to crawl the whole website and pull out like, these are orphan pages. These are pages that, are ranking between 3 and 20 on Google for a topic or something like that. I'm able to pull out certain kinds of data to prioritize what to update, which is game changer for me. But to your point, like even just staying on top of what we have, I often I call them gremlins. Like they just appear and someone's like, hey, this is a blog that references a product we don't sell anymore. And I'm like, I have no idea who you are and what you're talking about, but okay, we'll deprecate the blog. I'm not gonna hold on to this if we don't do this anymore. But it's like I keep finding blogs that I didn't even know existed because I can't go back to 2010 and find every single piece of content ever. So things just appear and I'm like, I don't know who this is or who wrote this or what era this is from, but we're gonna do something with it.
Yeah, that's funny. Many sites, because they might go through you might go through a couple different redesigns or like different teams in charge of content. And then like you come in and you start like going through all of it and it's like an archaeological dig. Like you discover like the different layers, or the different like eras, and you can then start to kind of like make sense of what's going on. But that's a good tip on MarketMuse. That's a tool that actually hasn't come up as much as I thought it would on this podcast. But my brief experience with it was that it was very good.
Yeah.
Any other tools in your toolkit that you find to be exceptionally helpful, either for this type of thing or other content-related projects?
I use, obviously, MarketMuse for a range of things. So the inventory management is great. I also love them for research. And I really enjoy their optimization tool. Like it gives you like colors and they light up. And it just, every writer I've ever been like, can you go optimize this in MarketMuse? They're like, that was a delightful experience. I'm like, I'm gonna go let them have that as a testimonial. But I've also started using Demand Jump, so they're more of like a pillar-based approach. A newer company and just doing some interesting stuff. Like it's not a cluster, it's a pillar or something like that. I don't know. But it's pretty cool. They do. They just have a really great view also of your competitors, which I really like. So you could see your keyword rankings and your competitor keyword rankings and just kind of get a feel for how you're competing in your space and in your like target area. So I like that. And then what I'm starting to dig into now, I'm not an expert, so don't no one message me and ask for help in this because I'm still trying to learn. Is I'm trying to use something like 6 Sense. So our demand gen team uses 6 Sense, but I'm trying to build views in there where then I can see how many deals that make it like to this stage or that stage or whatever touch various pieces of content. So I can make a segment for like anyone who reads the blog, anyone who checks out our glossary, people who read specific blogs, like, if it's something from like the security team that writes like really technical how to do threat hunting kind of blogs, like are those blogs showing up in deals? Are they leading to better deal sizes and things like that? Like that's what I'm trying to start teasing out because I think, the question I always get asked is like, what's the ROI on this piece of content? And I'm like, I don't know. People read it and then they convert. Like,
Yeah. It's like an almost impossible question to answer on like on a per piece basis. It's so difficult to drill down that far.
Hard. Yeah. And so it's just really helpful now, like trying in 6 Sense to be able to at least tease out like, okay, in general, people who, like in my head, I think people who are reading the blog are still at the awareness stage, but it might turn out that actually they're further along in the funnel and they're closer to consideration or decision. And that's really helpful for me to know and then to write more pieces that are helpful to that kind of audience.
Okay, so Demand Jump and 6sense, those are two tools I've never heard of before, which is great. I love finding new stuff. So since we were talking about content attribution, I would love to ask you about data. Are there a handful of metrics that you really care about?
Yes, and it's gotten harder and harder to track things because my GA4 is not as solid as my Universal Analytics was. Like, I felt like in Universal Analytics, I was always, and now GA4, I am once more a novice. But we really look at things like return visitors. I think that's a great indication. I obviously track organic traffic and click-through rates. But yeah, it's the return traffic. It's multiple pages or engagement rate or whatever you want to call it per session. I look at those kinds of things. And then I also try and really get like a qualitative approach as well. Like I know we're all about data and metrics, but it's also kind of like when I interact with our sales team, if there's certain assets that they're like, oh, I always use blah, blah case study, or, oh, this one pager always gets me a callback or whatever it is. Like those kinds of conversations are super helpful as well.
I was just on the site and your primary calls to action really stand out to me. And I'm curious how this affects content, like kind of going backwards from that and the way you measure stuff. So you can start a trial or you can request a demo, but nested under the demo button, there's an interactive demo or you can book a demo. So there's really three options there, which is like kind of like a hybrid product-led growth thing where, like that has been so hot for the past couple of years, balanced along with this kind of, I don't want to call it old school, but like more traditional, like get a demo, talk to a salesperson. Can you talk about having both up there? Like, how does that affect the way that you think about content and the stuff that you might measure?
Yeah, it's super interesting because what I've seen in terms of the people who go through our interactive demos versus sign up for a free trial versus get a demo. Like in the end, that person really just wants to be like, so what does this product do? Like, let me get in and see what you're actually talking about. Because you can say things like, spot this and this, or like get visibility into that, accelerate your insights into action, all of these kinds of great messages. But in the end, someone wants to see like, if I click the button, what does it do? And so I think the free trial is always going to be great with that and like is a big conversion point for us. But at the same time, like it's a free trial. Maybe they're not using the full range of data that they would have permission to bring in if they signed up for a paid account. Maybe it's a security team and they're not going to connect any of their own data. And so they might not see the full breadth of it, which is then why they would want to use an interactive demo and just kind of click around and see like, oh, okay, so this and this and this would be the workflow for solving a security incident or doing a threat hunt or something like that. Versus like, okay, this sounds intriguing. Now I'll talk to a salesperson and actually like let them do their pitch and like hear the whole thing. I mean, we all know it's like, oh, I don't want to talk to a salesperson, but I really want to see the product. So let me in and let's take a look. I do find that like what we often do in the content is where possible, I try and have like a certain amount of like recipe element of it. Like if you want to do this yourself, like here's the free trial, do this, do this, do this, and you can have this outcome too. And like show like in 3 easy steps, this would be the dashboard you would be clicking through and seeing. Otherwise, like really trying to make sure we use as many like visuals and interactive elements that really show like for the person who's signing up for the free trial, for the person who's signing up for like clicking into a demo, like they really want to see the product in action. So the more that we can actually just deliver that in the content up front, usually the better the chances are that then they'll just sign up and talk to sales and get into the funnel there.
I really love that. I think having a couple options is fantastic because whenever I come across a site and it's a demo only call to action, I'm just so hesitant to click because I know what's going to happen next and I don't like it. And I totally get, like when we get leads, for super, like I want to get on calls too. I want to try to sell you in person because I have I have a high degree of confidence that I can get it done, but at the same time, like for most SaaS products, give me a screenshot. Like, let me just see something before you force me to talk to somebody. So that's really cool.
Exactly.
Earlier you mentioned product marketing, demand gen, a social team. Like it's at tiny companies, that's just one person. Could you talk about like the marketing org at Sumo Logic? Like, just the different teams, and then maybe specifically the content team, like who's on the content team and what are their roles?
Content, it's the funniest org structure I've ever been at. It's Sumo Logic, so I'm just prefacing it that way. But content actually falls under product marketing at Sumo Logic. So I report to the VP of product and content, essentially. Like they shoved content onto him. But so under product marketing, we obviously have the product marketers, but we also have competitive intelligence and content. And then there's also a brand team, which owns design. We have events as well as a field marketing and events. We have demand gen, which I think field marketing and events actually, they're kind of melded a little bit. And then we have corporate comms and social, as well as just based on the personalities at play, the corporate comms and social also owns our customer advocacy and customer marketing.
Okay, so that is very well-rounded. So my next question is, whenever a company has a really robust marketing org, there is a certain amount of collaboration that happens across teams. How much time do you spend doing that kind of thing, like working with product marketing, chatting with demand gen, like, talking with social about a campaign you're running versus like kind of working sort of within your own silo?
I always think that content has to be the glue between everybody because we're the ones that like we're the ones who make the thing that gets used by everybody. So like if I'm going to make, if we're going to do a campaign around, insights to action and what that means in terms of like logging and taking what you figured out in the platform and being able to really have like a business mindset to it. That's something that's going to need the product input to mean like, what do we mean by insight? Like, what is that? What does that actually look like in the product? But then we're also going to need, okay, how are we going to talk about this on social? How are we going to spend money to drive this with demand gen? How does this affect like how we show up at events and what our messaging looks like there? And so content kind of has to provide not just the assets, but also, make sure that it fits into this broader strategy. So I feel like the bulk of my job is collaboration. And then like now and then I get to carve out an afternoon to go write a blog.
Yeah.
Like do some editing and things like do my real job. But I feel like much of my real job is that like, okay, what does this campaign look like? What is the message we're trying to give? Like, what is the story we're trying to tell with this latest launch or with this new initiative that we're pushing?
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely a lot of collaboration.
Yeah, that's cool. I've likened, running a content team at a larger company to being the captain of a cruise ship. It's like you do have to get from point A to point B, but along the way, you have to serve dinner. You got to have water slides for the kids. Like you have a casino. Like there's a lot of other things that have to happen along the way. And there's a lot of wrangling that needs to happen too. But all of that has to happen to create the right experience, So I think that content folks at smaller companies look at that and they're like, I want to just do content. I want to get stuff out the door. And for a small company, that is probably what you should be doing. But at a larger company, it is the wrangling, it is the alignment, which never happens by accident. That is so important.
Well, and I mean, also, I think at a smaller company, you are all of those things. Like you don't have to align; it's within you.
True,
If I think about it, like when I've run campaigns where it was like a team of one, essentially on very small marketing teams or a team of 2 or 3. I'd be the one writing the piece, getting the social prepped, getting the website ready to roll. All like digital team and demand gen and social and content all was me. And so, there was less need for alignment in terms of a conversation, but just internally making sure I was really solid on all of those different pieces.
Yeah. Do you have any tips for staying aligned with your own team and other teams? Like, is everything documented somewhere? Do you meet frequently? Like, is it a lot of async?
All of the above. So we I think it really depends on the team and the project. We recently did a project and I discovered that I love Miro.
Oh, Miro is the best.
Right? I didn't used to love Miro because I was just like confused by it, or it wasn't laid out in a way that really worked for me. But we did this whole website launch and you could see like version 1 and then like, hey, what if we change this and this and this? And then design would swarm and then I would swarm in and then bring like product managers or product marketers in and be like, did I butcher the content? Like, does this still work? Does this still like fit what we're trying to do? And then design would come back and be like, that isn't going to fit. Come back, and like we could just put it all in Miro. And so I love Miro for that. I am an Asana person. So like I do for project management, keep everything in Asana. But at the end, I think it's also like, it's probably undervalued how important soft skills are, like just communicating. Having relationships with the people on different teams. So that's not like the only time you ever poke them is to be like, hey, where's this? Or what's happening with that? But to actually know them and be humans first just makes it so much easier to collaborate, where then you're constantly slacking and messaging and, saying like, oh, by the way, like I met with so-and-so and they said this and this about this project, putting it on your radar and like just having that rapport. It's hard to be like, and then document it. Like it's not it's not an obvious thing to talk about, but I think it's really, really vital for any content marketer or just human is to have those kinds of soft skills to connect with other people.
Absolutely. I think that many careers start with hard skills, writing, designing, programming, or whatever it is. And then over time, the importance of the technical skill decreases and the importance of the soft skills increase to the point where like later on at a certain point, like, your job is just to get it done, figure out how to get it done. You know what I mean? Like build the relationships with people, keep the project on track, keep everyone on the same page. Like even if you don't write a word of code or content or design anything at all, but I hear you on carving out that afternoon for writing. Cause like, that's where, like, to me, that's where I find like the satisfaction of content too.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's funny. Like recently I ghost wrote a blog for one of our executives and I was like, oh yeah, I still remember how to do this. Yeah. Like, that's great. Like, I'm so glad. Okay, cool.
Zoe, thanks so much for doing this. I feel like in each episode, we uncover one or two things that are totally unique to that episode. And this one, our brief discussion about curiosity, like really, really resonated with me. I think it will really resonate with other folks too. And then also editorial debt, which comes up all the time in the Slack group in different forms. Like not everyone uses that terminology, but it's just like so important. And a lot of teams struggle to deal with that. So you've provided us with lots of good stuff to think about, some very actionable tips also. So thank you very much for your time. We'll definitely send folks to the Sumo Logic website. I always recommend after listening to an episode, go to the company website and see it in person, like interact with it. You know what I mean? I feel like that's when you can start to take like, oh, Zoe said this and here it is. And like, that's when the inspiration occurs for a lot of folks. But
love it.
Where can we send folks to connect with you? Social profiles, personal website, or anywhere else?
Yep, LinkedIn is where it's at. I used to be a Twitter junkie, but now it's just LinkedIn. So Zoe Hawkins on LinkedIn. You'll know it's the right one because I have sparkles on my name. So
okay, perfect. We'll leave links to the Sumo Logic site and your LinkedIn in the show notes. And again, thank you so much for doing this. It's so great to meet you, and I hope we can chat again soon.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a real blast.
Absolutely. Take care.